So, on today's podcast, I have another very, very interesting guest. We have Mr. Ian Brooks, who's completed 2 decades in coaching, 20 years in coaching, nine as a goalkeeping coach. He's currently with Aland United, if I've pronounced it correctly. It's a top division women's club in Finland. He's also a UEFA B and UEFA B in goalkeeping and works with the English FA as a coach developer. So, Ian, wonderful having you. Thank you for agreeing. How are you? And let's hear about your journey.
No, thank you for having me. It's good to be on. Had a look through some of the guests you've got as well, so I'm looking forward to watching a few of those as well. Um, but yeah, so currently with Orland United, nearly there, but my family still pronounce it wrong, so I wouldn't worry. So for me, my journey kind of, much like many young players in England, towards the end of your teens, you end up kind of helping out the younger players and getting into coaching that way.
Yep.
So kind of that was my level one, level two, and doing a bit of community work, going into schools before going off to uni. And then kind of had a period where I was doing bits and pieces always, but not loads. Before the youth modules came out, I did a bit of work in schools as well around that time. And then when the youth modules came out, I took those on. I actually started my teacher training as well, and then moved. And all of a sudden, it kind of things clicked into place, and that really started my journey. Firstly, with like pre-academy with Plymouth Argyle, then getting onto my B license. Followed up with the county girls down here working with the goalkeepers. By this point, I'd specialised, and it just kept going from there. Really, so they completed the B license, and that was kind of a big door opener in a way.
Yeah.
And then, really, during COVID, we kind of had those 2 years where unless you were full time in the game, you weren't coaching. I
Right.
actually found that quite difficult, but that was a bit of a prompt to kind of push myself again. And then picked up work again with county, but also sort of regional work for the FA
Yeah.
with the women's high performance centres, which they started for goalkeepers, which was absolutely brilliant. Um, and then with Plymouth Argyle ladies as well. And then kind of a little bit around the Lionesses stuff, and then access my for B goalkeeping, as you mentioned. And then kind of got access to the coach developer work as well, which I absolutely love doing. And then in a kind of strange twist of events, ended up then full time in the game in Finland. So it's been yeah a varied journey, quite a long journey, but it's been enjoyable.
You've had quite an experience for sure. And why I look forward to this podcast is that I'm going to be asking you questions that a lot of coaches really want to know. So this is going
Yeah,
to be, it will be different for sure. So let's get into it then. So while you were working at Plymouth Argyle, you had to juggle a day job. Now, this is a harsh reality for a lot of coaches because, after all, coaching doesn't always pay the bills. So, what's your opinion on full-time coaching opportunities?
it's so tough. It really is. I mean, it's coaching's kind of been my constant, so it's always been I've done a little bit on the side, and sometimes that's been a nice little learner on the side, a little top up, and sometimes it's kind of just been to keep enjoying it.
Yeah.
Um, Even when I was teaching, I was coaching throughout my teacher training. But when I decided to have that push, it was quite hard to find a job that would still allow me to kind of work the evenings and coach.
Yeah.
And it's an issue that so many coaches have, and I think we lose a lot of great coaches because of it. There's certainly people that I've worked with in the past, brilliant coaches, and they can't, families or to give up every evening and then work all day as well, and it's hard work. So it's something I've got used to.
Yeah.
I was quite lucky. I mean, at one point, I think I had 10 different roles. A couple of voluntary ones helping some teams or friends out, and then all these little bit part roles, and then alongside a full time job. And it feels like that is the harsh reality of coaching in the UK, as you say, until you can get that break. But for me, it's kind of finding a job that would allow that coaching at a time. And the coaching's always been enjoyable, so you do it, but it's very difficult, and there are roles out there,
Yeah.
you know. I still look fairly regularly now, but there's a pay issue as well, as you say. I mean, some of my roles have been quite well paid compared to other jobs, but when you're only doing that, casually or an hour or two a week, it's
Right.
as you say, it doesn't pay the bills. And I think there is a lot of jobs in football around kind of the community setups like that, which they are charities, but whether it be teaching and coaching, and they're kind of in the low 20s, and
Yeah.
it's especially in England at the minute, you can't live off that.
Yeah.
And that's the sad reality of it. So there are opportunities there's not many, but you'd still almost have to find another job to kind of make it manageable. Is the way I see it until you start getting up to the higher levels, and of
A
course
lot.
then the jobs are a lot more competitive and not so many.
Right. And a lot of British coaches have actually had to go abroad, like yourself. So you went abroad to get a full-time role. Now, how did you get the role? How can other coaches do something similar? Because it is a reality that you need to explore to try and get that opportunity.
Yeah, I sometimes say it's luck, and other people say no, it's your hard work that's paid off. So there's something in that perhaps, but it was something I'd looked at for a while, and kind of explored a little bit, but not in great depth. And then had quite a big life event, which kind of changed my perceptions on things and changed my situation.
Right.
And I thought, well, there's no time like now to make this happen if I want to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I've kind of throughout my coaching journey said I always want a year or two full time to really push myself,
Right.
and I'd like to live abroad. So I put a message out on LinkedIn
Yeah.
one day and just said I quite like the idea of Scandinavia and the Nordics. So
Yeah.
I included Canada as well because it's another country I wanted to explore, and said anyone in these countries coaching that would share their story,
Yeah.
would talk about what it's like coaching out there, because I knew there was a few British people that had gone that way. And the manager of Orland at the time, who was an English guy, messaged me and he said, "Oh, do you want to talk?" Yeah, brilliant. We'll have a chat. And we spoke for about an hour and a half about football. And then I think it was a few days later we spoke again. He's like, "Yeah, I think I've got a job for you."
Okay.
And it was about to go out on one of the sites. But logistically, it's quite hard to get all the clubs together because there wasn't the budget within one club to make it happen. So three clubs clubbed together
Yeah.
to make that happen. But it very much feels like it was a stroke of luck and timing, and it was just essentially a shout to just talk to coaches and learn about their journey and how they did it. And kind of since that and since being out there, I've spoken to a lot more about it. And I think it is just putting yourself out there
Yeah.
and being open to it. I certainly didn't go for the money, but it was an opportunity to live away. It was an opportunity to really work on my craft.
Right.
And at that point in my life, it was, a possibility and the right thing to do. I couldn't have worked for that money in the UK,
Yeah.
and that's again the reality of it. So it's, you know, there's a chance to work full time at a really good level.
Yeah.
You go for it. So I think it's just, yeah, networking, talk to coaches, listen to other people's stories. The amount of podcasts British Coaches Network used to do them and talk about people's journeys, and I used to listen to them. Oh yeah, it's possible. And then try and reach out to those people as well. I
Right.
think most people in the coaching world are happy to share their stories and help each other out.
I think that's some good advice for all the coaches who do intend on, getting a full-time job, perhaps abroad. So now, another thing that I was really intrigued by reading about you. So you're working full-time with three clubs, as you mentioned. I'm not going to name the clubs because I don't want to get the pronunciation wrong again. But how do you balance working for three clubs and being
Um,
effective in your role?
yeah, it worked quite well. I think the clubs were very supportive of it, and for me, when we first spoke about it, I was like, well, yeah, that's fine. We work multiple jobs, that's worked. So um, in that sense, I wasn't too worried. But when I get out there, Orland and EFCO Mariehamn, they kind of share all their facilities,
Yeah.
and that was the large bulk of my work. So
Right.
it was all at the same location, and they kind of managed the session so there was enough transition time.
Yeah.
It did mean I would kind of be in, run a session, and then kind of chuck that equipment, quick Superman change of clothes, straight
Yeah.
back out to the next session. And then I might do, some days that was like 3 sessions in a row.
Right.
Um, but being at the same location, it's quite nice because you knew everyone around the clubs. So it did work quite well. But of course, at times there is a little bit of a clash. If you overrun or maybe you need to deal with something,
Yeah.
um, and certainly fixtures as well. Big away days and kind of a lot of travel, and you might miss little bits and pieces or
Right.
midweek games, and it meant cancelling sessions because the facilities weren't available and I wasn't available.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it worked quite well. And then the third club was Jomala Ike. So they were a little bit further out of town, but I just did kind of 3 hour straight session with juniors and then senior keepers.
Wow.
Um, but again, it was flying between sessions, but it wasn't. It's quite a quiet and small island, and
Right.
yeah, so it's nothing like shooting around the road to the UK trying to get between one session to the other. So it was quite manageable, but
Right.
I guess that comes from the experience of
So
doing
what
multiple roles before.
so what did your daily routine look like then?
It was kind of it still remained kind of evening and afternoon work.
Yeah.
Um, we had quite a few young players with Orland, so like with schooling and stuff, so we started quite late. So I'd still get up early and kind of do any of my planning, any analysis, maybe looking at a bit of footage, stuff like that, and then kind of have my downtime in that as well.
Right.
And then certain days we have meetings, so I'd go in for the meeting, whether that's pre or post game, and then on the grass it's generally kind of an hour and a half of all, and that was 4, sometimes 5 days a week, because I'd have the keepers in on their days off occasionally.
Right.
And then well, yeah, so we'd go from kind of 4:30 till 6, and then generally I'd be on sessions kind of 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 with the other clubs. So it's kind of the working day was anything between like 2 and 9, and then
Right.
the kind of mornings were mine.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course match days on Saturdays. So we'd quite often travel on the Friday.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so it's
So from the way you have explained it, I think luck got you in, but hard work kept you there. That's how I look at it. Yes. So
yeah,
now now we come to the main part of the podcast. Your expertise lies in goalkeeping. So I'm really going to pick your brains now for the next
yeah.
15-20 minutes just on goalkeeping. So let's start off. What does your usual training session with goalkeepers look like?
Um, of course, if anything, it does vary. But I think I've got a fairly set way. Depends on age group and time and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's always to get a bit of the fundamentals in, a bit of handling and positioning, just to really lock those in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the traditional way in many aspects. Um, but for me, that kind of, you know, there's a thing around commentators going, "Oh, it's hit straight at the keeper." It's not hit straight at the keeper. They're in the right position.
Yeah.
And if you're in the right position and your handling's at a reliable, autonomous standard, you don't have to think about it. You catch the ball, you take control of the game.
Right.
So although they might be the least used actions, for me, that's always got to be built in. So it is kind of the old skill acquisition, repetitive stuff,
Yeah.
but it will be within that kind of, the players will have their physical warm up,
Right.
and then we'll kind of have a handling and activation warm up for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll roll into our topic. With younger players, that would generally be scaffolded.
Okay.
Um, so we'd look at kind of the technique behind the scenario and then kind of build the scenario up around it. So whether it be crossing, we'd be looking at the high take and technique of the takeoff, um, and our position of approach and things, and then kind of build it back to where we're getting a cross put in, and then maybe we'll have some interference, and
Right.
then if time would allow, we might go live. In the first team environment, it's a little bit different. Sometimes it'd be our activation, then they're straight into a session,
Yeah.
or they might go and do a bit and then come back again. So you really had to be flexible with it, um, and quite often I would
Uh, you're on mute. Sorry. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
plan kind of
Ah, yes.
for the week.
Yep. Go ahead.
Is
Yes.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we'd kind of plan for the week and say we're going to look at these topics, and we'll fit it in around the first team. So it wasn't so structured always in that this is happening on this day, but there would be, certainly we'd pick up a topic when we have more time, and then maybe it'd just be a little bit of handling work, or possibly a lead into the session. So particularly in the first team environment, it really does vary.
Makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
and of course, you never know injuries and things like that as well. But there will always be those kind of fundamentals in there for me, and then hopefully some kind of chaos, or I like to call it, where we have kind of a live random session where it just paints lots of pictures and lots of different scenarios for the keepers. And I think it's really important to blend the two,
Yeah.
and that they get the opportunity for both, because at the end of the day, they keep the ball out the net, and however they do that, we're happy with. Of
Right.
course, if we can make it more efficient, we will. But if they're effective, then we're happy. So we need to kind of give them opportunities to find out what works for them.
Quite an interesting opinion. So, what individual qualities do you look for when you work with when you're potentially going to work with a goalkeeper?
Um, Again, it's varied. I mean, my past been through development
Yeah,
up to first team, so I feel like I keep a lot of those ideas from that development. And for me, coachability. Can I coach them, and are they going to listen? And I don't want them to just do everything I say, but
right.
you get players that are so kind of blinkered and blinded. It's really hard to kind of make progress.
Yeah,
And I think that at some point those sort of players may get stuck. Of course, there's exceptional players that do it their way and it works brilliantly. But coachability is a big one for me. Kind of mental toughness and resilience.
yeah.
Looking at the position, it's not a nice position. Um, all
Yes,
goalkeepers love it, but the reality is it's not a nice position. So they kind of have to have that element to them and really want it. Um, and then a kind of a general base. Obviously, there's athletic ability around it, but we can adapt that. We can change that. Um, so yeah, for me, kind of the mental side's as big as anything. So the determination to do well, to work and to develop and be coachable
right,
is almost more important than the other bits because we can build them up on that. We can build up some of the physical attributes.
right.
Um, Technique we can look at and build. But even with the younger keeps, I like to see there's a bit of a base there
Yeah,
and real determination.
right. That's interesting because I expected you to probably give a list of technical and tactical attributes, but it's good. It's interesting that for you it's psychosocial over anything else.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yes, that's interesting. So now you mentioned that your style varies because different age groups, different environments. So how does your coaching differ across younger age groups, age ranges, right up to senior goalkeepers?
it's probably more within the content of the session.
Yeah.
I think my own style of coaching. Um,
You're on mute again.
I've
Yes.
never been kind of an autocratic to be. Ah, perfect. Yes, I've not been a kind of autocratic or demanding coach so much. I like it to be a kind of a two-way relationship always, where they can ask questions and they can question me.
Yeah.
And the way I treat people, I want to treat them the same the whole way through, whether they're a youth player or a senior player.
Yeah.
So in terms of my style, it doesn't change so much, but probably more within the way I'll structure the session. Certainly with the younger players, there will be more technical work.
Right.
There will be more kind of unopposed work um, in terms of kind of practice design. It'll be a lot more announced, so they know that they get opportunities to practice and repeat,
Right.
um, and a little bit of discussion there, but
Yeah.
probably mold them that little bit more. There's probably a lot more information that I give to them in terms of kind of skill acquisition,
Yeah.
and then it's kind of developing the kind of the pace of the session.
Right.
So the session on paper could look very similar, but there'll be a lot more around the pace and what things I'm looking for. And then how I deliver that information as well, and how I break the skill down. Because a senior keeper will have their ways that may be effective.
Yeah.
So for me, it's
Sorry, Johan, you have again gone silent.
just to control maybe the tempo and the pace. I think it could be the connection.
No worries. Yes.
um, so yeah, with the younger players, it's more about supporting them, recognizing triggers, and kind of learning their own way,
Yes.
but building those pictures for them. So there's a bit around design and how it's delivered, I would say. Um, and of course, when you get to senior levels, you have to be a little bit more demanding and put a little bit more expectation on them.
Right.
Um, but throughout, things like the goalkeeper serving, I want that at all age groups.
Right.
But it just means that I have to do the groundwork for the younger players to be able to serve, whereas the senior keepers are already there.
Right.
Um,
I
but yeah,
think
it's
yeah.
size and session design really.
Sounds like a good reference point for all the other goalkeeping coaches. Now, the modern day goalkeeper, they are expected to obviously, be as good as an outfield player, at least in possession. Yes. So, how do you develop a goalkeeper's technique in terms of first touch and distribution?
Yeah, it's a great point you raised because when you look at the actions in a game,
Yeah.
the footwork far outweighs what they do with their hands and saves, and yet, as I've already said, most of my focus is on the other part of the game.
Right.
Um, and I think that is slightly changing, but it is true of possibly many goalkeeper coaches. But there's always an opportunity to practice for me. So if I look back to my high performance sessions where we maybe had 8 goalkeepers, there's no real reason for us as coaches to serve the ball. So we'd have all the goalkeepers serving, so they're getting practice straight away,
Yeah.
whether that's pass, whether that's a short pass or a driven pass or a lofted ball in. They might be putting the crosses in so it looks more like a goal kick.
Yeah.
Um, but then putting kind of the context in behind that. So we may have arranged a session, and although they may look like outfield players, because their position would maybe paint the picture and say, look, okay, you've got a goal there and a goal there, but if you think about this from your view, that might be your right back and left back.
Yes.
So you're kind of trying to paint that picture as they're working. So there's always a little bit to think about,
Right.
even if they're being used as a server or as an outfield player.
Yeah.
Um, Again, for me, we can kind of put a little bit of constraint on them as well for the serve. So particularly the younger players, if we're looking at technique and I want it in a certain area,
Yeah.
you know, it's a pass. You're
Yes.
passing that to your teammate essentially.
Yeah.
So again, they get that repetition,
Yeah.
and then even things like collecting the balls in. A big thing with first team keepers this year, they all wanted to develop both feet. So it's like, well, when we go and collect the balls, if there's an opportunity, you put them all in with your other foot.
Yeah.
I can't remember who I stole that off of, but I heard it on a podcast and thought it's a great idea.
Right.
So it's finding opportunities for them to kind of practice that on their own.
Yeah.
Certainly with the younger players, there's some technical work that goes in, and I've probably spent 3 or 4 weeks of a block teaching them how to pass or going through the technique of a clip ball, so they can then serve and get that repetition and practice in around the sessions.
Right.
And then of course they get integrated into sessions as well.
Yeah.
So quite often when they join the group session, they'll get an opportunity to practice that, and then it'll be my role to support what they're seeing or question them on what they're seeing and how they go about doing it.
Yeah.
And what tools they're selecting, how they're playing that ball, and why, and the reason behind that.
Right.
But it's a massive part of the game.
It is.
Um, but I
Yeah.
think as goalkeeping coaches, and certainly I know I do, we still, most of our time is spent on the other part of it, and the out of possession side. But of course, that's the one where they've got to keep the ball out the net, and that's still their primary job. So
Right.
but yeah, look for opportunities to integrate it.
Yeah. I wanted your thoughts on something that I do. So I don't know what the environment is like at where you're at, but where I'm at, the goalkeepers that usually come in that volunteer to be goalkeepers, who claim they are goalkeepers, and this is I'm talking U10, U12 level. Now these are goalkeepers because they enjoy saving shots. They enjoy the more traditional stuff. Now, in order to also integrate them, or rather, educate them on the other part, which is in possession, I like to try and make them play occasionally as a center back within training. So, in your small-sided games, and even in a few tactical components. What do you think of using this as a technique to try and just, get them to get an idea of the roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive piece around integration and getting goalkeepers into sessions, and also kind of not excluding them from their mates. So it's something that really interests me of how we can do it effectively as football coaches as a whole.
Yeah.
And as you say, centre backs, it's the same picture.
Yes.
Um, so they get that same view. They start painting those pictures. So for me, that's one way of doing it.
Right.
But you can have them as end zone players where they might be a target player, but they still get to work on that first touch and then play out. You might put them on the side as bounce players.
Yeah.
Wherever we put them, I feel we can still paint a picture for them.
Yeah.
So the game that they're playing, you can argue the game that they play is different to the other players, anyways, in a game.
Yes.
And I don't feel it needs to be any different in a training session.
Right.
So for the outfield players, they might be playing a directional game with bounce players on the side. Now those bounce players are goalkeepers, but what I might do is say to the goalkeepers, okay, what does this picture look like for you?
Mm.
Oh, okay, well, that could be my left back and that could be my right back, and well, actually I could play it to the other side to the other goalkeeper and look to play it beyond the players. So maybe he's my striker. and just kind of, can we paint a picture for them that looks like their game
Yeah.
that they'll play at the weekend, or so they're building those pictures up. They're getting to practice their techniques, and they're
Yeah.
getting to build pictures. So and again, it might be centre back, but there's again we might say, do you know what? We're going to chuck you in the centre midfield role
Right.
because we want you to be, aware of what's going on. We want you to be able to play quickly. So we want pressure on you,
Yeah.
because then when they go into a game and someone's pressing, that pressure won't feel so much.
Right. And of
So I
course,
think as long as we've kind of justified it and we've got our reasoning and we know what outcome we're looking for, it's
right.
yeah, can we get them involved and how do we do it, and what does it mean for them?
Right. I mean, with the latest tactical trend of high pressing, I think goalkeepers being able to, make things happen under pressure is, of course, becoming much more significant. Now, you had also mentioned about a bit about psychology. You said it's not a nice position, I think, right? It's not, it's definitely not. So, it can be psychologically demanding with a lot of pressure because I mean, any other position you make a mistake, there's still someone to save you. But as a goalkeeper, you'll probably lose the match if that happens. So how do you educate your goalkeepers on how to deal with something like that?
Um, a lot is through conversations,
Yeah.
because it's yeah, I kind of say it with jest that it's a horrible position, but it is, as you say, one mistake and you get punished.
Yes.
And even in possession, if you slightly mishit that pass, there's a chance you're one on one and they score.
Right.
Um, whereas you could have, some of the best players in the world, they might actually misplace 3 or 4 in a game and no one would notice.
Yes.
So there is kind of that real focal point in the goalkeepers. Um, so I try to get them not to dwell on anything.
Okay.
A big message for me is you can't affect it, and by still thinking about and ruminating on it, you're going to affect something else later on. Um, and we have the discussion after the game. We have the discussion in the week. It doesn't have to happen straight away.
Right.
I don't like to put any pressure. I don't like to see pressure on goalkeepers. You know, it's obvious when you make a mistake as a goalkeeper. There's
Yes.
no hiding it. So for me, you don't need me or anyone else telling you that you've made that mistake because you know.
Right.
So that's kind of a bit of the support I like to put around, but then have those conversations and you know mistakes will happen, but can we learn from it and can we build something from it, and we can look back at it and see why and then learn. But also in sessions at times. So maybe we have a chaos session. Maybe we have a session that is designed for lots of goals to be scored. But
Right.
as soon as one's got in, the next ball's in play. So you haven't got time to worry about it. You just have to get up, next job, get up, next job. Um, and kind of almost build a habit of just, okay, next one, next job. But it is difficult, I think there's a lot to be said. There is psychological support coming in for goalkeepers more and more now, which is
Mhm.
brilliant, and it is needed. And you'll see things like the mental resets as well. There's a piece the other day about goalkeepers just changing their wristband
Okay.
as kind of a mental reset. For me, it was a bit around goal kicks. I had quite a set routine on dead ball situations, and that kind of acted as a bit of a buffer. If I miskicked one, well, I know I've got my routine, so I just go again.
Yeah.
But also, if other stuff was going wrong, that was my kind of switch to go right, get the next kick right, maybe take a bit off, just hit a clean one, and then it goes a bit further, and then get back into that rhythm. And because I'd be focused on that, which I could control, I'd forget about the bits that I couldn't control or maybe had gone wrong. So it's different for every goalkeeper. But yeah, there is a lot out there, the mental resets, but I think it can be built in sessions and in conversations around positivity, um, but around stressing them as well, exposing them to failure,
Right.
um, but with that attitude of we carry on, um, because we see it, one mistake and you can lose your place, or and because that intensity of the pressure, I think that one mistake can well, it can kill a career, but it can certainly kill you for a few games as well.
Yeah.
So they need to have that kind of resilience, and it's not an issue of not caring,
Yeah.
but if you care too much about that one mistake, it's going to have a really detrimental effect on your performance. So for me, it's just accepting that it will happen and you've got to move on.
Yes.
And then how I can best support that. And I'm not a psychologist. I quite enjoy reading around it,
Yeah.
but it's a big area. I think that will come into play. and that I'd like to learn more around as well.
Right. Talking about mistakes, I think the biggest, most severe example was perhaps the former Liverpool goalkeeper, Karius. He was signed as, as a great goalkeeper, and then because of that one match, suddenly you had him play in leagues that he probably never planned on playing in.
Yeah,
So, yes. Now, I'm going to ask you a very tough question. I think it's going to be tough for you because you're exposed to goalkeeping and football. If you had to choose one player, the best goalkeeper in the world, according to you, and just one name, not five names, just one name, with a reason as to why young goalkeepers, as well as goalkeeping coaches, as well as general outfield coaches should study, who would that be? Who, according to you, is the best goalkeeper in the world?
tough. That's a slightly different question to the usual one as well. So that's thrown
Okay.
me. For me, I've got to say, looking at the Premier League for a minute, Allison for me. I
Okay.
know there's been a lot of debate around the Allison Edison thing,
Yeah.
um, and Edison's distribution is unbelievable. But for me, Allison's just that little bit more controlled.
Okay.
Um, so sometimes the goalkeepers that make it look the easiest for me are the better ones in many ways. You
Right.
know, if they can be in the right positions and make stuff look easy, keep hold of the ball, we're constantly gaining possession and taking control of the game.
Yeah.
Um, it's calm, it's composed, it's the players in front of you will just build that trust, and I think that kind of ripples through the team.
Right.
So that those kind of composed, really controlled keepers for me are the top ones, and I think at the minute
Yeah.
Allison is probably edging that debate for me. Um, you know, there's various techniques in goalkeeping, and if we look at De Gea, and he came in for a lot of stick when he first came into the Premier League, he just had a different style, and it was effective.
Yeah.
Um, and for certain teams, that will work. Um, he had very much more of a futsal base. We saw a lot more foot saves, which are becoming more common in the game.
Mhm.
But I think at the time it was very new,
It was, yes.
and there's always an opportunity for the ball to bounce out. So I think we have to have a blend of those techniques and kind of make the game as easy as possible. It's not about the big spectacular saves. They're a necessity when we have to. But
Right.
those goalkeepers that can really control everything and stay patient and calm are the ones for me. So I think Allison kind of edges that for
Up
me at
there.
the minute on the whole.
And just to make it a little bit easier now, which are the other goalkeepers you believe we should study on?
I think you've always got to take a mix. Look at the different leagues and don't always look at the top clubs either. Um, because there are different styles throughout the world, different styles of goalkeeping. So I think if you really want to get into it, you have to kind of expose yourself to those styles.
Yeah,
You know, again, and Arna United's getting a lot of stick at the minute,
yeah,
and I'm always one to back a goalkeeper, and I've been watching him a little bit, and it's there are some concerns, but he's a very different style of goalkeeper. He's quite explosive in his power, and he kind of makes those big saves. So again, there's nothing wrong with looking at that keeper and saying, well, okay, what good can I take from that, or what lessons can I learn from that?
yeah,
Um, and we have all the big names. If you go to the top clubs, the top keepers are there, but you don't tend to see as much. So go and look around the leagues, go to lower league football and have a look at other goalkeepers as well, and just see as many different ways and as many different styles. Because I think we do get wrapped up of the big names. Who's at Barcelona, who's at Real Madrid. They must be the best keepers.
right.
Um, but it's not necessarily so. And there's always someone that's about to buck a trend. When we look at Peter Schmeichel, I used to watch a lot growing up.
You're on mute again. Yeah.
He was like nothing we'd seen before. Oh, there's a connection gone.
No, no.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So have a look at who's doing things differently as well. What can we learn from them? Um, so yeah, I would just expose yourself to as much as you can on that front, and not tend to worry about who's doing the best
Right.
and what the media are saying about keepers, because it's go and have a look and just take what you can, take
Right.
bits from everyone and build your toolbox.
Great shout. Now, For you, since you've been a goalkeeping coach for so many years, what would your advice be to all the other goalkeeping coaches who are looking at, getting better?
Um, keep learning, keep reading, keep watching other coaches, but make your own opinions. So there's a lot of stuff around Instagram and YouTube and sessions, and some of it's fantastic, and some maybe not so much. But there's always a context to it that we might be missing.
Right.
So for me, it's like I've spent some seasons where I've gone, I'm not going to deliver the same session twice because I want to try new things. But be brave. The game of football is quite chaotic and quite random at times. So you can put on a session. It's not about the people watching or anything like that. It's about the goalkeepers or about your players.
Yeah.
So be a bit out there. Think of something different. Put something on. Try it. Know why you're doing it. Have your outcomes and give it a go, because you can have a really chaotic session, but that's no difference to a game where the ball's constantly bouncing around the box and there's lots of shots happening. So for me as well, again, I have spoken about kind of the core techniques and the fundamentals, and I hit them most sessions. But there has to be a chance for a goalkeeper to practice, to see live situations, and it's what do your goalkeepers need? Find that blend and get that right
Mm.
for them. And maybe they just need exposure to lots of situations. Maybe they just need to enjoy it. So it might be fun games and fun practices just to give them a love of goalkeeping, and we might not worry about the technique. So it's about the players and not the coach, anyways. But as a coach, go and explore things. Go and talk to other coaches. Have conversations. Watch other goalkeepers. Watch other sessions. The goalkeeping, the football world's quite small
Yeah.
when we dig into it, and the goalkeeping world's even smaller. There's
Right.
some fantastic coaches out there that I've got in touch with that have been really, really supportive, and they'll let you come in and watch a session, and they've got an open door, and there's so much that can be learned from that.
Right.
But question it, justify it. We can't pick up a session and expect it to look the same. We've got to know our own reasons behind it, and more importantly, know our players and what they're getting out of it.
Right.
But yeah, be creative with it, and create game-like situations for your players, but make it about what they need.
So basically, just try and observe as much as you can across different
Yeah,
environments.
just keep learning.
Basically, yes. Great points. Great points. There now, my usual protocol before ending a podcast to know what your future plans are in your career.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, so it's really hard to say, because I certainly, when I started looking at international jobs, my mindset was that I had some nice jobs in the UK, to be fair, coaching wise, and I just wanted a bit of a break from the UK. So I was looking at it going, "Oh, I'll do a bit of academy work or whatever it is, something that gets me a ticket
Yeah.
somewhere else, and a bit of life experience with it." And I really landed on my feet in the role I had. Going into the National League in Finland, top level for the women's game, and then academy for the top level of the men's. So it wasn't a level I expected to find myself in, um, which in itself kind of opens up a whole host of opportunities and contacts. So I do go back out there on the 20, well, end of January. So probably around 26th, 27th of January for the season. So this year my role's changed. I go back out as assistant and goalkeeping for Orland.
Okay.
So they've got a much bigger chunk, and then I'll be doing some for Yomla again as well, goalkeepers and outfield.
Right.
Again, I don't think we should kind of box ourselves in too much. We need to understand the whole game. Beyond that, I couldn't say it's. I've only signed a season's contract again.
Okay.
You know, in an ideal world, I'd love to be kind of back in the UK, in maybe the WSL or the Championship
Mm.
with the women's side of the game, or you know,
Right.
if I dream big, somewhere in the England setup. But
That's the ultimate goal. Yes. For
yeah, of course, that would be the absolute ultimate. But I really couldn't say I'm going to go out. There's going to be a lot of new learning experiences. I learned loads last year, so much. It'll be a different manager this year, so there'll be new lessons
yeah.
with the role change, and there'll be more to learn. And it's hard to say. So it's going to be head down, focus on the season, get the best results we can, support the players as much as I can, and at some point I'll have to kind of look at options. I'd like to stay in and around the top area of the game as much as I can. Um, there's certainly other places I'd like to live in as well, and so yeah, I'm not planning too far ahead. Um, I think ultimately, my roots are in England, so I'd like to be back here permanently one day, but certainly not against exploring other countries and other cultures and footballing cultures. So it's really quite open. But as in football, it's so unpredictable. Um, and one day you could be a Premier League manager, and the next day you're back in an academy somewhere anyway. So I'm not, I'm not unaware of the realities of football, that we could have a terrible season and I could be back in the UK working a normal job again,
Right.
and picking up coaching on the side. So there is a reality to that. But yeah, I think at the minute, enjoy the season, try and stay, in the top levels, and keep pushing myself and the players. Um, and yeah, you never know, but certainly pipe dreams. That
Yeah.
there is a there is a goal that I'd love to hit one day. But of course, the football industry is a tough industry as well, and as much as we love football and love our jobs, there is a reality of it as well. But yeah, so I'll never stop coaching,
Yes.
and hopefully I'll be full time as long as I can. But you never know, so I might end up lecturing sport or something like that, just to stay connected. But yeah, there's lots of options. But for me at this point, it's kind of go into the season again and learn and take as much as I can from it, and kind of see where I land as such. 10 months time at the end of the season. So yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think this was a wonderful chat, wonderful podcast, because you've given away some very, very good ideas when it comes to goalkeeping. And also, you spoke about how what the reality is like for coaches as an industry, and how basically you're a very good example of someone who's actually left your own comfort zone, left your known surroundings to go and achieve your dreams. So this is definitely inspiring, and it was wonderful having a chat with you. Thank you for your time, and I
No,
hope we
no problem at
connect
all.
again very soon.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, the coaching world's small, and reach out to people because they will help and they will support.
Yeah, that's the intention. Pleasure having you.